And I remember in that moment, I remember crying in that closet, looking at my mom, and I said, I promise you I'll never be an alcoholic. And I thought by making her that promise that I would not end up like him in some way. And the sad part about it is I didn't become an alcoholic, but I just took a different path on, quote, roading my life up to this point.
Welcome to the Savage Servant Podcast. My name is Jason.
My name is Nick.
And today, what are we doing, Nick?
Today, I'm going to give you my story this point.
Today, we're actually going to turn the tables. We're going to interview Nick a little bit, and we're going to go through some of his background because we realize that we have been talking to other men about their stories and talking about things, and we have not gone through the things that we've gone through and talked about that as in depth as we could have. We haven't shared our backgrounds as much. Yeah. So today we're going to do Nick's because I am still waiting for the statute of limits to run out on mine. So we're going to start with you. So we normally start this off. Tell us your background, like where you are now and kind of where you...
Well, I think the only way to get through all it is just to start at the beginning.
Okay.
So, before I say any of this is just my story. Everyone has their own. I'm not saying this to be a victim. I'm not saying this to get any, attention or, oh, woe's me. But in order for you to understand what we're saying and that we truly mean the things that we are talking about and that we're growing through, you need to know where we come from. And this is a difficult thing for me. This is very hard because these are some of the things that I've only shared with, my counselor that I'd had for a number of years and my girlfriend who was and still is a part of this. So yeah, I don't even know if Jason is going to know a lot of this stuff.
Not all of it. I know for sure there's things that I don't know. We haven't discussed why certain things happened or...
Yeah.
Have you ever done your testimony even in like a men's group setting or a Christian setting to share your testimony?
I take that back, yes. There was a friend of mine who, when everything kind of went south, right at the beginning of my divorce, he took me to a men's group that he went to, or I believe he still goes to at a local church, which is right down the street from yours. And they laid hands and they prayed for me and they let me talk a little bit about why I was there and what brought me to them. But I never got to divulge fully, my story or anything like that.
Or you weren't really ready to, right?
Oh, I mean, I don't know that honestly you're ever really ready to, because you have had the devil on your back your whole life and those demons and so many things in that closet that if you were ready, you would have dealt with them in a much different way.
That's fair.
So we'll take it back to the beginning. My father was an emergency room physician, and his father and 3 of my uncles were all alcoholics. I am the first male on my dad's side of the family in 5 generations to not be an alcoholic. That being said, that does not mean that I didn't learn to have addictions in different ways and learn to hurt the people that I loved and that I didn't love, or perfect strangers, just as much. When I was born, one of the stories my dad used to laugh at was that he left me in the crib at 6 months old to go to a bar to get drunk because he forgot that he had a kid and my mom was at work. And he thought that was a hilarious story. I'm like, yeah, that's great. That's so funny. Every day of my life, until I was the age of 28, my dad drank every single day. He was a highly functioning alcoholic. I could see him do amazing things in the emergency room because I worked alongside him, and I would be like, how could this man save someone's life and have the admiration of all of his colleagues and walk out of that door and do the dumbest things I've ever seen a human being do. Just throw his life in the trash.
Was he drinking while he was practicing?
He would go home and drink and then pass out, wake up, and go to work.
But he wasn't like drinking in the morning to stay functional. It was
No.
afterwards. That's interesting.
It was always afterwards. It was never before.
Okay.
He, got multiple DUIs. He lost his license. I can't tell you the number of times they put him in diversion. It was something that he struggled with his whole life. And then his brother, he has two brothers who are physicians. One had passed away. And then another one who also went down the same path of being an amazing physician, but then succumbed to addiction as well. So every day, throughout my childhood, I have three younger sisters. I would go home, and 99% of the time, my dad would already be drunk or in the process of getting drunk. Drinking beer nonstop. I didn't get to spend much time with him because he was either working a lot, which he did work quite a bit. He worked 12-hour days. He would work 24, 28 shifts a month for 15 years at a time. The man was a machine in that aspect. He sacrificed a lot to become a physician. He had a wife he was supporting. He had, depending on the time, he had 1 up to 4 kids. And he was a sole provider. So he had a lot of responsibility. But at the same time, he was coping through whatever went on in his life and was continuing to go on by drinking. And that affected me greatly because he was verbally, mentally, and then it got to the point where I was old enough, he was physically abusive. I just have horrible memories hiding in a closet because, he's stomping around the house drunk, and my mom, my sisters, and I are just hiding out because if he found us, he was going to beat the crap out of us. And he doesn't even remember those things. He'd wake up just blacked out, doesn't remember anything. I'd bring stuff up to him and just wouldn't happen. So I grew up in living in fear every day, every single day. Whether I would come home from school and the phone book would be open to the lawyers section of the yellow pages. My dad was constantly threatening my mom with getting a divorce and this and that. My mom...
He was threatening her while he was an alcoholic?
Yes, he was threatening her because she is my mom has a very big heart. And my mom is very traditional in some ways, and an enabler in some ways.
She's Hispanic, right?
She is.
Okay.
Hispanic and Italian. So they're very, I guess, loyal to being married.
That's my wife and her family, and you see a lot of it. It's, I think one of the reasons why my wife is so scared of certain things is the things she's seen, but her family, the same thing, like the women, even when people are abusive or alcoholics, it's just something like they just don't leave. Like that's not something that you do.
Yeah. And so for years, it was constantly watching my mother day in and day out cry. I was always scared. Every time my dad would come home and he'd start drinking, the yelling, the screaming, the crying, and then waking up the next morning like everything was fine. And that went on for a long time, and so I started to cope by eating. That became my first addiction. So at the age of 12, I weighed 242 pounds, and I was roughly 5'2". I was big. So now I'm very overweight. I'm the fat kid because when I grew up, bullying was just like something that happened, and it was just suck it up. And so I would go to school, and kids are mean, and I'd get bullied there. I'd get beat up, get my glasses broken. I was a fat kid, and because we moved around, because my dad was going to medical school in LA and then coming back to Northern California, I never had a real set of friends to like latch on to that kind of like your support system. So I was always the new kid, which made it even worse. So I'm constantly getting in fights, defending myself, getting made fun of, the outcast in a way. So the next thing I had to learn to do was defend myself verbally, because at that time I was still young enough. My dad, I didn't know how to fight. I was never involved in any kind of self-defense or anything like that. It was just like my dad told me, he's like, if you don't take care of it at school, when you get home, I'm going to take care of you. Like, if you don't defend yourself, I'm going to beat your ass.
That's crazy.
And he would threaten me with that. And it's same thing with my sisters. He would tell me if like anybody bullied her, if anybody got in their face, or bullied them, that if I didn't beat the crap out of the kid doing that I was going to be the one receiving the belt. And whether or not those were just empty threats, when you're a kid and that's your father, the one that is supposed to protect you and love you and be an example for you, that hits home.
That's a lot of pressure to put
That
on
is
your
a
kid,
lot.
yeah.
So I'm getting bullied at home where I don't feel safe, and I'm getting bullied at school.
Yeah.
So then I had to learn to have my sharp tongue. That I figured that if I was just going to get beat up, then I had to learn to make fun of people verbally. And I developed a very quick sense of wit. And those bullies, normally they're not smart. They're not quick-witted. They're not thinking. They're just aggression-driven, and they want to stand out because they're insecure, and they want to pick on the fat kids. So I would just make fun of them. Nothing was off limits. And then people would start to laugh at them. And then I started to get a little bit of self-esteem because now I'm the funny kid.
Yeah.
And so that progressed. And then it got to the point where I was big enough to learn how to physically defend myself. And then that bullying kind of came to a stop in about my sophomore year of high school. Then I was involved in sports and football and things like that. There's years worth of memories of traumatic things that happen in my life every single day. And I know a lot of people go through that. So the next thing that I got addicted to, because now you're a teenager, and teenagers, you want to have a girlfriend. I didn't have a girlfriend until I was literally out of college. I was still overweight. I was smart. I was getting good grades. I graduated, top of my class, and I kind of latched on to some of the guys in high school that were popular, because now it's like, well, Nick's the funny kid. Nick will make you laugh. Now I'm in with the cool kids, and per se, and they're getting girlfriends and they're going to parties and stuff. And then I started getting addicted to DVD adult content, and that became a regular thing in my life. It became another addiction or dopamine hit to ease the pain of feeling rejected from women or girls, or because that's a different type of feeling. You get rejected, getting bullied as a kid, and then you go into your adult life and you think, all your friends are having girlfriends, going out on dates, and you're just sitting there like, I don't know what else to say. Like, am I physically just not attractive? You're just beating up on yourself more, and I didn't have much self-esteem to begin with, so that didn't take much.
Yeah.
So then I got a girlfriend, and then I got my heart broke, and then it just...
That was in college?
That was in college, and then it just took off. I lost a bunch of weight. I was charismatic now. I was, had a little bit of confidence under my belt, and I just went on the next and worst, along with still having addictions to food intermittently and still looking at adult content all the time. I became very sexually driven towards women, and I didn't know how to be in a relationship. I didn't know... I saw it. Of course, I knew right from wrong, but at that point, I had so much that I had built up to that point that I didn't know really... my friends would tell me, like, just, quote, hit it and quit it, and, like, go on to the next, and this and that, and it's just this revolving door that you don't think of them as really people, and they're more experiences, and I did a lot of cruel things to a lot of women that didn't deserve it. Every one of them. And I can honestly say that even if the relationship wasn't going to work out, its ultimate downfall in every scenario, and I say this wholeheartedly, was my fault. Because I was either cheating, lying, manipulating, or all three.
Did you ever
feel like you were making it up to yourself? Like you weren't popular in high school with females, and you weren't able to have those relationships. Yeah. Like you almost like, I had to go through all these years of not being popular, not being able to like. Yeah. So that was one of the things that I remember thinking when I went through a similar phase. It was just like, oh well, everybody else got to do this like in high school. Yeah. So I deserve to have my time of like being popular. I deserve my time of like, and you kind of like purge almost. You do. I call it the ugly duckling syndrome. Whereas you all of a sudden you look good, you feel good. Now you have all this control and all this quote power, and you're using it in all the ways it shouldn't.
Yeah.
And you became a destructive force, and then you're lying. You became this. I mean, I was convinced to a point where I was just this narcissistic asshole, and I would never permanently be happy. And then, you know, I was doing great in my job because I graduated in the field at a very young age, and I was making really good money. And I remember I had a new Harley, I had a street bike, I bought a new house. I was just, you know, all my friends are, you know, living with the parents still. And then that manic part of me became very destructive in areas of my life. Like, you know, I started a business that eventually took my first home because I had to file bankruptcy because I had no idea what the heck I was doing. And then it ultimately led me to my ex-wife, who I was the, you know, there were a lot of reasons why her and I should, you know, that marriage would not have worked out. But the ultimate downfall of it, you know, not being ending as it should have was with me. I take 100% responsibility for it because now I was mentally and emotionally abusive. And she was trying to deal with it best I can because I was cheating, I was lying. You know, and I just could have been a man and said, you know what, I just don't want this anymore. Let's just go our separate ways. You know, I'll pay the child support and alimony. I just, you know, let me see my daughter. And that was the blessing that came out of that, was my daughter. Because she is, you know, one of the loves of my life. Like, she's just, that's my kid. That's, you know, that's my everything. Yeah, and then I on top of that, I had a big issue with anger. I would get super defensive all the time. Like, you couldn't win an argument with me. I would talk until I ran out of a voice. And, you know, talking about this is hard.
Yeah.
Because you think back, knowing who you are now, and even people now in my life, maybe to a point still think that, you know, I'm not, you know, who I should be, which is fine because this is, you know, a road, not a goal. And that, you know, we aren't as Christian men as we should be, but, you know, it's a path. And I'm not pretending in any way, shape, or form that I'm this amazing Christian man who goes about life and I'm not making mistakes every day still. But I'm not who I was. My girlfriend now, she was in my life in that divorce phase, and I put her through a lot as well. I broke her trust, I lied, I cheated at a time. I was coming out of who I was, and she was the beginning of that. And like we've talked about many a time on here, you know, we do interviews with men, they always say that, you know, what's your biggest compelling reason to change, or why is it, you know, you are where you are, and every one of them, you know, their wife, their girlfriend, the love of her life, whoever it may be, and she was mine. And she was able to see through something that no one in my life was ever to see through, and that was the fog that, you know, and through this dense fog, I was caught in my own prison. And she saw like something no one had ever seen, not even me. And that was my spark for that change. I didn't do it at first. It took me a while. It took all my dirty laundry being aired and it coming out and hurting her kids, her family, ruining their trust. And that was the start of my journey, which Jason and I are still on. And I can wholeheartedly say that I genuinely love this woman with all my heart, because to this day, every day, whether she feels the same certain days about me or not, I am there being as committed, loyal, and the best version of myself I've ever been. Because I want to be the best version of myself I've ever been for myself, for her, my daughter, her kids, just being a better man in general. You know, I've talked about in the past about God putting something on your heart that only you can understand. And she doesn't understand it. Friends and family don't understand it. why I go through and do these things. But I've seen things, I've felt things that, having danced with the devil for so long, there's no one else it could be but God. There's no other way it's coincidental. There's no other way that I could see these things or pray for these things, and all of a sudden, things are starting to come true. Now, granted, whether I'm the only one being shown them or not, his influence in my life is enormous. And I know the devil's tricks, so he leaves me alone. I no longer have an addiction to adult content. I no longer live a life of lust and simple pleasures. I try to hold my thoughts accountable. I try to be the most generous and kind person that I can be. I'm no longer, Mr. Charismatic walking around trying to be everybody's friend and make everybody laugh. I'm not seeking the attention of people that, they're good people or coworkers or whatever. I may crack a joke or be nice, but I'm not going over the top to be like, oh, pay attention to me, I need your attention, because I don't, because the only people that need attention are the people that I love. And my daughter, my girlfriend, her kids, my family, my friends, my close friends.
How did you start going about breaking down those addictions?
Well, I always knew that, the food and the adult content, and even I was addicted to lying. I was addicted to embellishing. When I started to go to a Christian counselor, I knew at that point, like, there's a lifetime of stuff that I've never dealt with. Mm-hmm. And he served a purpose. I went to him for so long to where I could end his stories. And that's when I knew I kind of exhausted him.
His resources.
His resources and his time. And he was very, a lot of things made sense to me. But not to everybody, which is fine because it's not their journey, it's mine.
Those are specific things for each person, right? We
Yeah.
hear the same story, think different things.
Yeah. So, it's a challenge. And I used to live with a lot of guilt and regret over the last 5 years. Thankfully now my ex-wife and I, it's amicable, and I get to see my daughter as much as I want, even on the days I don't have her. I pay my child support and alimony. I take care of my responsibilities, and the only thing we discuss is the kid that we have together. So I am grateful for that, because I've heard horror stories about people getting divorced and it just being this battle, and from a monetary standpoint, to time with their kids. And I am very grateful for my girlfriend now, because she has given me grace and love and understanding, and still is in my life, even though I don't, I didn't at a point deserve it.
So you think, so it was going through the counseling and just speaking through all those challenges, was that how you feel you made the most steps towards getting rid of them, like getting rid of those addictions?
Yeah, it was, because I didn't know how to solve them on my own. Otherwise, like I said, I kind of would have.
Do you think it was an accountability thing, or just trying to figure out why you were doing it?
It was both.
Okay.
It was a sense of like, why am I really doing this? Why do I look to this thing every day, or why do I have to get that dopamine hit all the time? Yeah. It's because growing up, there's so many things that as kids we don't really understand that we do need, and sometimes parents don't even understand that our kids need that time, love, and attention, that nurturing. I was never nurtured. My mom was always solely dedicated to my father. It was never, my sisters got attention, but when it came to me, I was the oldest and the only boy. It's just like, suck it up, buttercup. Like, oh well, Nicholas is,
Yeah, well, there was I feel like that generation has a very specific way of thinking about raising boys.
Yeah.
Because your parents were kind of in that generation. They were still before the participation trophy generation.
Yeah.
Right? They were in the,
that Gen X.
beat you in the store.
Oh yeah, I can't tell you. There's a lot of lessons I learned from getting hit with a wooden spoon. My grandmother,
No, and it's not a bad thing.
No,
there's definitely there's different parts of each generation.
But there's a limit
to
it, and there's a time and a place for it.
And I'm sure alcohol doesn't help the differentiating line of going too far.
No, and you hear your dad say some terrible things to you even one time as a 7 or 8 year old, and that kind of crap will stick with you forever.
Now, I wanted to ask, because I thought of this while you were going through it, before we get back to the rest of it, I wanted to ask: do you think that your dad, because we have a mutual coworker that he's admitted to me that he works so much because if he's not at work, he knows he'll go home and drink. Do you think that your dad worked so much
No.
in order to stay away from it?
No, he was diagnosed as type 1 bipolar. So
So he was like manic almost.
he would spend exorbitant amounts of money. Like I came home one time, I bought, like in 2004, I bought an Infiniti G35 red, beautiful car. And because he had an Infiniti. And then I came to my parents' house one day and there are 3 cars in the driveway, all brand new Infinitis. And I was like, I walked in
3?
and I'm looking at all these new cars. I'm like, is you part of a car club now? I'm like,
Yeah.
what's up? I walk in and ask my mom. I was like, no, your father bought them all. Because, you know, being an ER physician, working as many shifts as he did, he made a lot of money.
Yeah.
And he squandered it. And he, you know, did a lot of that. And it wasn't just that. He smoked cigars. Like, he was spending $1,200 a month on cigars. Like,
What?
he had a very addictive personality. So it wasn't just that. He didn't just work because he liked the fact that he was good at what he did and he liked the attention that it gave him.
Yeah.
So it filled his ego. And then he would come home and he's like, I'm a doctor. I have, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'll do whatever the hell I want. Blah, blah, blah. And, you know, just blow money.
I do need to smoke them with your dad, but
Oh,
but that's interesting because that was just, I was curious because one of the guys that we work with, he had said he knows
Yeah.
that he knows he's an alcoholic, very
Yeah.
functional, but he doesn't drink on the days that he works, and so he specifically works a ton. He works on the ambulance and he works at the hospital, and
Yeah.
he told me flat out. He's like, no, I was like, why do you work so? He's a little bit older.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, you work so much.
Yeah.
Like, I thought I worked a lot, and he is just always going. He's like, no, because if I have too much time on my hands, I will just sit and drink.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting. Okay, so sorry, moving on.
No.
That.
And it is that way for some, and that may have been a small portion why my dad did it, but ultimately it's not what I saw. We never really had those kind of conversations.
So it feeds ego too, that money.
It does. It does. It makes you, you know, like you said, feel on top of the world. You're God. You know, you're a doctor. You're the closest thing to God. Like, you know, that's.
Well, when he was in the more of the golden age of emergency medicine, where like he was doing all of it as far as the procedures
yeah, he was
and those
cracking
things.
chests and
Yeah,
like I saw
it was
him do
cowboy medicine too.
Yeah, it was. I saw him do some amazing things and save a lot of people's lives, and I would just look at him and be like, why can't you be this guy outside of the ER? You know, as a kid, I told my mom. I remember the day that I told her. We were hiding in a closet in my bedroom with my 2 sisters at the time, and my dad was wielding around a gun, drunk in the house, saying if he found us, that was it. And he doesn't remember that. He doesn't remember that at all.
Did he say? I mean, in these moments, is he mad at you for something?
He's belligerently blackout drunk.
But is it because you did something
No,
that he
this
like
is-
made into something
No,
larger?
this is
He just
unprovoked.
all of a sudden would
All of a sudden.
want to be mad at you.
He was just walking stress, anger,
Yeah,
and it would come out when he would, you know,
and
drink,
he would blame you guys.
and he would just go off and just anything.
Yeah.
And I remember in that moment, I remember crying in that closet, looking at my mom, and I said, I promise you I'll never be an alcoholic. And I thought by making her that promise that I would not end up like him in some way. And the sad part about it is I didn't become an alcoholic, but I just took a different path on, you know, quote, roading my life up to this point.
Yeah. Well, and you say that his father was an alcoholic.
My grandfather
right?
was
So
an alcoholic.
He had things that led him down his path to addictions.
And his father and his 2 brothers. Yeah.
And you just happened to choose a different path. But
Yeah.
we all have ways of getting through the things that we
Yeah, I was.
go through. Was he an alcoholic before he was a physician?
Oh yeah,
Was he?
he'd been drinking since like young age.
Well, you hear sometimes, like especially emergency room physicians or
Yeah.
people that work in EMS, firefighters, police officers, right? They turn to some of those things to combat the stress and the pressure of the job. So that's always an instigator of that too.
It is. And you know, My dad did a good job of providing a roof over our head, clothes on our back, and food in our mouth. We never went without any of that stuff. I mean, we were poor for a long time because, he was working his ass off and had to go through med school, residency, and then, he started doing a lot better for himself. But until, I came to the point of what I did, my crossroads is that I had blamed him for a lot of things. In my head, I was like, it's because of this, because of that. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it wasn't his fault, it was my decision. And I just, I didn't have the skills necessary to even realize it, and I didn't have the strength. I was a coward. I felt weak. All I had turned myself into was a nice guy. That wolf in sheep's clothing. And I'm still learning every single day how to talk, to my daughter better, and how to talk to my girlfriend better, and how to communicate my feelings better, and to understand myself more, and to pray more. Another thing, after it happened, my daughter and I went to this thing called Healing Families, and it was an hour and a half every Tuesday, and my daughter, it was parents, it's for parents and kids. It was all women, 20 women in this class, and me, and their kids, and the kids would go off and has a group talk with another counselor because of their parents going through a divorce or going through something traumatic. And so my daughter would go with them, and then I would be in this class with nothing but women who have been hurt by men.
And then you're the man that had hurt.
Yes.
Oh my god.
And I had said one day after like our 6th time going, I said, I'm the villain in every one of your stories. I said, but I'm still here. I said, so don't think that there aren't men out there that don't want to change.
Yeah.
I said, I just started this, but I said, I've listened to all of your stories. And every one of the things that you have mentioned that, the man you had in your life, I have done. And I said it to them. I was like putting myself, out to pasture, like this isn't going to end well. Like,
was that sobering to hear it from the other side?
Oh,
over and over again.
Oh my gosh!
I can't imagine
most
a better
definitely
way to get
without a doubt
perspective.
Oh, without a doubt. It was one of the first times I sat back and I'm like, what have I done?
That's insane. That's really, I just can't imagine hearing another person's version of what I've done, over and over again. But I mean, clearly it's other people, right? But that's...
But you can relate to every one of their stories.
Yeah.
In fact, I was finishing their stories in my head of what happened.
And you're like, this is what I would have done in that situation?
And boom. I'm like, I just learned to stop talking at a certain point. I listened, and my daughter loved going and talking to the counselors and other kids relating to her because I was very concerned that, what she had gone through up to this point, I didn't want it to affect her forever.
So was God a thing in your household? Were you Christian? Were your family involved in the church at all?
I grew up Catholic. I went to Sunday school every Sunday for 12 years. I went through Holy Communion, Catechism, Confirmation. I did all that. I never really believed too much in faith. I never had much faith. I wanted to because as a kid, I remember praying, please God, please stop my dad from drinking. Please, don't have him scream at me. Please just make this terror in my life. Because it was sheer terror as a kid. Yeah. A grown man screaming, yelling, breaking windows. It was so hard. I mean, I fought the guy 3 times.
Yeah.
28 years old, he comes with me, I'm working on my car, drunk, grabs me by the throat, starts to choke me. I said, stop or I'm going to hit you. Took off my glasses, still choking me, one-handed quarter, boom, put him down my parents' driveway.
Yeah.
It was...
So you had a hard time having faith in a situation
I had a very
like
hard
that,
time,
which is understandable.
I had a very hard time having faith my whole life up until 5 years ago. I did. I mean, I have tattoos. Well, all my tattoos are all religious-based. I have a cross on my back with wings that says faith underneath it. So something inside of me always wanted to believe that I was being protected, watched over, that God was there listening, because as a kid, I'm like, why are you letting this happen to me? I remember crying in my room like, please, God, make him stop. And I hear my mom screaming, crying outside, begging my dad to stop. And my sisters are crying. And that was years of this stuff, not just one time. That was like a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
When I was 10. So, faith for me was really hard, even though I would go to church. I go to church, and Catholic churches are they're designed, this is my opinion, around guilt. You go in, you feel worse than when you left. Like, honestly. Like, God, I was like, God, you know what I'm going through, and you come in here and make me feel like I'm even worse. I'm like, where do I get this? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, we can get into all sorts of things with different churches and the way they do things. And my wife had a hard time with the Catholic church that she went to, and I think that there's a lot of churches though that I know put people off to God, and it's sad that a place that's meant to promote right, it's promote Christ, that's supposed to make disciples, ends up literally shutting down discipleship.
That's exactly what it did. And it wasn't until I started going to like a Christian church and learning how that was taught, that I started listen more and try to pay attention more. Not that I did it 100%, but it got my foot a little bit in the door to like wanting to understand it on my own, personally. Not that I felt I would ever be preaching it to someone.
You understand more the way that they taught it?
I do. Just the story of God and the story of Jesus, and just everything. And just things started to make a lot more sense, because even as a kid, I didn't want to pay attention. It was Sunday, you're in church for 2.5 hours, and you got these Hispanic nuns trying to teach you Sunday school stuff and yelling at you and have a ruler out, hitting the table. And we went to predominantly Hispanic Catholic churches because my mother's Hispanic, and my
Did you go to the Spanish Mass?
No. Sometimes, because it would run over.
Yeah.
Or they'd say it both in English and Spanish. So, I mean, I didn't speak Spanish then.
No.
I speak a decent amount now because I had to learn it in high school. And
I've gone to a few Spanish masses with my wife and her family, and I feel like they're longer. I'm not sure if it's because the language is potentially longer and the way they have to conjugate vowels. Like, I'm not sure, or if it's genuinely like more material. I don't speak enough Spanish to like know all of it and like understand exactly, right?
There's some things that they make shorter, and there's some things they make longer.
Yeah,
so it's a mix of like both.
Okay.
But
I just realized, I was like, I feel like and maybe it just feels longer because I have no idea what
maybe
they're
that
saying
too.
half of
Like
the
if
time.
you understood it, you would be like,
I'm just sitting here listening to like a language that I don't understand, so I'm sure it takes longer.
It is.
So you guys started off in a Catholic home, and at what point did you start to search out God on your own? Because you said you went until you were 12, right? So did you stop going and then found your way back? Like, how did that?
I stopped going, and then I would go spurts intermittently here and there.
Would your family still go, and you just would stay home?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because before it was like when you were younger, and it was like a requirement. Now that I was older, I was like, I don't want to go.
And your mom would just let you stay home? Okay.
Yeah, my mom, she would just, Dad's not going. Why do I have to go? I started to develop the way, he would think. And
so did he ever go to church with you guys?
Hardly ever.
No, okay.
Ever, no.
That makes...
No.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm telling you all these guys, I'm telling you some very, very, very personal stuff about me, and I want to share this with you. But also at the same time, the flip side of that is, there were small moments, I could say on a handful, that I have that are good memories of my dad as a kid. And they stand out because there are very few. I don't know if he ever had the full intention on being who he was. I would like to hope not, but he was exposed to some of the same things I was. And hurt people. And I have had to learn and try to the best of my ability to try to forgive him for certain things and to work through a lot of that stuff so that I could have, even to this day, just talk to him a little bit, even though he still doesn't have the relationship that he could have with people in his life, myself included, because of just a lack of effort. He still can be a very giving person. He had some very kind attributes when it came to his money and helping people out. But he was never like over the top forthcoming with it. My mother, well, I'd said she was an enabler. She has a very, very kind heart. She was a good mom, given the scenario that she was in with my dad. She thought she was doing everything she could because she wanted to, be there for him ultimately, and we kind of got pushed to the back. But she, did as a very traditional wife did. She took care of the home and the kids, and my dad, made the money. And that was where that line was drawn in the sand. She didn't enable in certain ways. But my mom's not a bad person. I mean, she's a very good woman. She's a very loving mother.
Yeah, it sounds like she tried to make the best out of it, and
she was going through it too.
Did the best she could, right?
Yeah, she was going through it too. She was being, verbally and mentally, abused wife for many a year. Having to make up for all the scenes that my dad caused and all the nonsense bullshit that didn't have to exist. So she was going through her own stuff.
Yeah.
And then she had us on top of it. And she didn't have an answer for herself, and she didn't have an answer for us on how to get through it. We were left to our own devices. And that is another reason why I feel that, Jason and I are here. Because maybe you have gone through something like this. Maybe you experienced something similar to my story, and when we hear Jason's, maybe something similar to his. And maybe if you had somebody that you could relate to, you would know that it's not hopeless. And that your reason for change doesn't have to be you and just because. Sometimes, we'd like to change because of God, but let's be honest. If that was the case and I had a closer relationship to God, I might have. But I didn't, and it wasn't because of him.
No.
But at the same time, he still had a path that led me back to him eventually. Because he didn't give me a choice. He's like, are you going to continue to be who you've always been and do what you've always done? Or are you ready to make a change? Mm-hmm. I was ready because I had this reason and this person. And a lot of people say, oh, your daughter should have been your reason. I understand that. She should have been. She should have been enough. But being the man that I was, I'm not even saying man, just being the person that I was, I didn't see that. I didn't value it enough at the time.
Yeah.
And that's something that I felt really guilty over. But moving forward now, after that counseling, when I say like every single day I'm watching something or reading something to help better myself in some way, I am. I have not veered from this path. My heart is still with the woman I love. My mind is still trying to grow and better myself and heal from the stuff in the past. Have a closer relationship to God, a better relationship as a father with my daughter. All these things that I was never shown. I was never shown how to be a good father. I was never shown how to be a good man. Never shown how to be a good husband. Never shown how to communicate properly. And these aren't excuses. These are just things that I wish I would have learned because they would have saved me from so much, and other people, so much heartache and pain. Because my girlfriend now didn't deserve anything that I had done or said to her. None. She is absolutely, unequivocally loved my life, amazing. And I regret every single day that I wasn't the man that she deserves. And that's why I continue to try for myself, for her, for my daughter, every single day. And I've said this once and I'll say it again, nothing is impossible with God. No matter if your significant other doesn't believe it, no matter if your friends don't believe it, no matter if your kids don't believe it. Know that nothing is impossible with him. And even if they say, oh, you haven't changed, you still have some of the old attributes, or it's a process. But you're still somebody better than you were a day ago, a month ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. So it's a process. Keep believing in yourself. Keep trying every single day. And whether they say they believe you or not, one day they're going to believe you because they're not going to be given a choice. So like the evidence, you can't refute that. Consistency every single day in how you talk and how you act and the things that you say to yourself in, your attainment of your goals, whatever they are. You got to give a little every single day to all of it because it's all important. It's everything that you want. And you're going to get the things that you want. Trust me, you will. Because God would not have put it on your heart just to be a lesson. If the feeling is still there after the lesson is done, then it's something that you're going to get. If the feeling is gone and the lesson is done and you took the lesson, you're going to something else, well, then it was just a lesson. But not everything is. Not everything is just that. So when people say that to you, you don't have to believe that. And don't believe that, when they say like, oh, you're suffering from imposter syndrome, fake it till you make it. No. Because I don't care how good of an actor you are, you can only put on something for so long until you break. Because I did. And I thought I was amazing at acting and feeling. And then it came down and people could see right through it. And now I am who I am. And I'm continuing to grow with God's help, with my own, actions and words every day. I still make mistakes. But I'm trying to be as compassionate, understanding, loving, sacrificing, and doing the required things to be a better man, significant other, my girlfriend, and a father.
You think you have replaced the other addictions in your life with positive addictions?
Most definitely. 100%.
Like with the gym and with personal development.
Yep. Because now when I say I'm relentless, and we talked about this, I resonate with that word so much because I'm relentless at trying to be the best boyfriend, hopefully husband to, my girlfriend as possible. To tear down everything I thought that I still didn't have to work on, tearing it down even more and being better at it. Going to the gym, having a goal, eating better, thinking better about myself, not beating up on myself, going and just chipping away at it every single day. As a father, spending more time with my daughter, doing things that we enjoy now that she's older, and seeing her as much as possible. I still see her on days that I don't have her, 5-6 days a week. Like I could easily go pick her up, take her to lunch, go get her some, hey sweetheart, how's your day? Just being there. But yeah, I think that I have taken what used to be a hindrance and taken that same drive and put it towards things that are improving my life.
People, guys like us, men that have a predisposition to addictions, I would say, a lot of times we have to find something positive, I think, to fulfill those voids. Like we will always have addictions. The things that have changed, I've seen in your life, and I think the biggest things that have changed in my life is instead of trying to just stop, right? It's like, I just need to stop doing this, live a normal life. We're never going to have a normal life.
Yeah.
It's about replacing the negative addictions and those things that fulfill us and give us those dopamine hits with positive.
Yep.
Whether that is the gym or self-development, right? Those things. And it's easy to get off track and kind of take things too far, but that's where I've seen men that have addictions and have that personality type, right? They call it like the addictive personality type. Yeah. If you have a family history of addiction, like it's in you.
It is. And I think that I've kind of narrowed it down to this. We have like this ball of energy inside of us. And idle hands are the devil's playground. So that ball of energy is going to go somewhere, to something, to do something, good or bad.
Yeah.
Before, we felt we didn't have much of a choice in where that went because we were chasing pleasure-seeking things. Right? Like, we were just like, hey, this makes me feel good. I'm like, oh, I want more of this all the time.
Yeah, for me, it wasn't even, I didn't feel like I had control over it. It was, I didn't even think about trying to have control over it. It just went all over the place.
Just where you were.
Let it, wherever it felt the best for that moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now it's completely different. Now it's like, okay, I realize I know the devil. I know his tricks. I danced with that guy for years. I know what he's going to say. I know what he's going to put in front of me. I know what he's going to try to do to tempt me, to make me go off track, to make me feel depressed, to make me feel anxious or worried. The anxious and worried part I still have a hard time with, but I have no desire for any other woman. No lustful thoughts, none of that stuff. I don't care who you are. Like, I don't care. It's just like my mind and heart are in sync on one person, and that has never been that way in my life. And it's a sense of peace. When it comes to my goals, like the gym now, I don't waste my time sitting around eating food and junk and hiding behind it and getting that pleasure from that endorphin hit, from eating whatever it is. Watching adult content. It's like, nope, sorry. Because it takes away from that connection with your person.
So what do you think that mindset shift was for you? Because I know that that's a huge thing for men. It's in today, and
it's everywhere.
Well, and not just the adult content. I know that men in general have a hard time, like including me in the past, and like it affected me and my wife's relationship a lot in the beginning of it, because neither of us were in a good place. And how do you feel like you made that change? Because like everybody has their own direction, right? Their own path for that. But I know that other people definitely are on the beginning of that path too.
So when I started out on this, I knew it was a major problem. My counselor kind of helped me with the triggers and the way I was doing it, and I just had to go through the process of it. Granted, it was still my life intermittently, and then a few times you get caught by your girlfriend or whatever, and you're like, God, like this is just ruining my life. And I didn't understand, because even growing up, I was told like, hey, this is normal. This is what men do. Like, this is a normal thing. This is an outlet. Like, you're not cheating. What's the big deal? Blah, blah, blah. Wrong. Completely wrong.
Your dad was doing that?
Yeah.
Okay.
But even like, my uncles or, guys my own age, then it's like, bro, it's like, this is what you watch. It's no big deal. This is what you do. Take care of it. You're not cheating, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, you're completely wrong.
Yeah.
Because one, now, when you're with someone, whomever you're with, it's making that woman feel like they're not good enough. And it's causing trust issues. And now, it's invoking that feeling of not being, connected to them on an intimate level physically. And then it takes your mind other places.
Well, you say going through that process. So what did that look like for you?
That process was like, okay, just being blunt, like, how often do you do it? What do you look at? Why do you look at it? What does it make you feel? Why are you doing it?
So was you discussing like the background of
Yes.
it and what you were, okay? And then where did you move on from there?
There it was like, well, now that I understand what I'm doing, and it would intermittently come up, and a lot of the times, like at that point, it was like 70% of the time I was doing it less. So a huge chunk of it, but then it would pop up intermittently.
Okay.
And you get that feeling back and that lustful desire, and then all of a sudden, you're like, crap, like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
I have everything I've ever wanted in a person right here, physically and emotionally, and mentally. Why is this still a thing? So it came to a point where, after it upsetting her numerous times, and me still intermittently doing it, I was just like, enough is enough. But by that time, trust is broken, and you have to rebuild that, and it can be rebuilt, but it just takes time and consistency. And knowing that that's just not something you want. And this is the visual that I still have to this day. And every night when I go to sleep, when I'm not next to her, when I go to bed, I envision her hand on my chest, or her head on my chest, and her hand underneath it. And I would always give her a kiss goodnight on the forehead, and then I kiss her on the lips, and we'd fall asleep watching TV. And I would think to myself, would you trade parts of another person, whether it's their, physical attributes, their face, their body, whatever it is that you would like to do with them, or think you would like to do, and would you trade all of that for that moment with that woman? And then that day that I thought that first thing years ago, that was the first time I ever went, no way. Are you kidding me? Trade this for any of that, for any other woman, for any other thing? No way. This is my person. And that's the first time I've ever felt that feeling in my life, and that's how I know she's the one.
Yeah.
Because I've never felt that. I'm like, this is what everybody was talking about. This is it. I can actually feel and have that feeling for someone. I don't have any of those lustful desires anymore. I could care less. But then, once you develop that, don't trade parts for a person, which is one of the sayings that I tell myself, or had to. Now it's become so second nature, I don't have to say it. I don't have that. I don't want that. I don't need that. I don't have to go search for that adult content to have that dopamine hit anymore, because it's so much more than that. Because you get to have that experience with your person, your wife, your girlfriend, whomever, and you don't have to go searching anywhere else, especially if it's the one that you want to be with forever.
Yeah. My worry is, I guess, was wording it like that, and some young kid being like, well, I haven't met the person yet, so
Okay.
so I don't feel like that. So I guess,
So let me say it like this.
all I'm thinking is, like, you have to be able to look forward to that and be able to, like, keep yourself open to that without that, because I know that it's so hard, dude. Being a single man, especially a young single man in today's age, with not only with, like, I mean, honestly, women, especially young women today, are not, like, they're just not making good decisions in in a huge way.
Yeah, there's
And
social media.
the amount of crap that's out there.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to like pull something out where a young man that's listening to this that's having those issues can find a path out of it, or find something to hold on to. So what would you say to somebody who's struggling with those things? It's the very beginning of that path, right?
So if you think you're struggling with this at all, if it's something you're doing,
and they don't have someone, like,
you don't have anybody, and you're doing this every day, that's your go-to. It's like a routine before you go to bed, when you wake up, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Know that in this moment, you have a problem. And that problem needs to be dealt with. So step by step, you need to reduce the number of times that you do that, the frequency. Make them farther apart. And in its place, you need to come up with a routine. A buddy of mine who actually went to classes that help with adult content addiction.
Really?
Yeah. He had told me that when you are, quote, detoxing from that mentality, because it starts to shape the way you look at sex and being intimate with women differently. It changes your perception of it. It changes what gets you excited. It changes how you view them and the whole process, and it takes away from it. It's not anything endearing. It's not an intimate thing.
No, absolutely.
It's just an act, like you brushing your teeth. You just get it done. It's like, whew, that's great. Go to bed. He would say that when that urge would come to him, he would go do like squats. So he'd be at work, and he would go, like, if he had a thought, or he was going to go home and do it, he'd like, okay, I'd get home, or I'd be in the bathroom at work, and I would just do like 50 squats. Because the endorphins that are released can be similar to the dopamine that's released from that act. They're not about the same, but you get kind of a little bit of a rush. Or he would go home and just do push-ups until he was just exhausted.
Interesting.
So he would do something physical that would take the place, that would give him kind of an endorphin rush, because I've seen people like, well, I don't do that anymore, but now I go home and eat an entire pizza. Like, they're getting that satiation.
It's the same thing that we were saying. Like, you have to replace that. Okay, you replace that addiction with something positive.
Exactly.
Okay.
So he would do something physical, and then
Is he jacked now?
He was in pretty good shape. He was, but then he got into like long distance running.
Yeah.
And that helped him. He would listen to podcasts and stuff, and like even to like some Bible apps while he was running, and that kind of helped him because he was single, because he didn't have a choice, because he knew that addiction had ruined relationships because of what he'd done. So that's just something you can do. I wish I had all the answers for everybody that has a question about this, whether or not you're struggling with it or not. But start there and research it. There's so much stuff online on how to do it, and I know there's a lot of stuff shaming it. That's terrible, you're going to hell, and all this other crap. Like, look, it's just like any other addiction. Food can ruin your life. Alcohol can ruin your life. Drugs can ruin your life. Watching a ton of adult content can ruin your life. Anything that you do that's bad excessively can ruin your life.
Well, sin is sin, right? Like, like everybody has something that they struggle with.
Yeah, everybody does. But I mean, you never heard anybody being like, God, I go to the gym all the time. I hate it. I feel good. I look good. my clothes fit. Like, I gotta stop this. Like, no one ever says that. You know, there's
No, you can replace it with something good, which is what we were talking
Yeah.
about. So I like that approach. I think that's good.
Yeah.
I was just trying to play devil's advocate because you're saying like a big part of it was your person, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm just like thinking in my head, this is some poor kid like listening. He's like, well, I don't have a person, so
Yeah.
no.
I mean, it and your values then change because then you start looking at, you know, the person as a whole. And
Yeah, imagine going into a relationship with that clean view of things.
Yeah, and it may still not work out. You may not be compatible, whatever the case, but at least you've given yourself and the relationship a chance out the gate.
Yeah, you're not ruining it because you're looking at someone else in a negative or in a way that you should only be looking at your person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy to think and feel the way that I do now, in a lot of ways, because who I was 5 years ago, I hate that guy. I got to be honest, I do. And I wish it could be better, but it couldn't have been because that's just the way things happened then. But now every day I have a choice on how I think, how I act, you know, things that I say, and it's always your choice.
I had heard in another story that basically the things that you go through, if you're able to get through them and make something positive out of them, they become your sermon. Mm-hmm. And that's what I try to think of when people will always throw in like, well, if God is out there, then why is he letting you go through all this shit? Why is...
Be careful what you ask God for, because the road he shows you may not be the road you thought about traveling.
Well,
but it's going to be the one that changes things.
Yeah, and we don't know. We don't, like, who knows, man? Like, maybe you going through all that and someone else going through whatever they're going through, maybe that makes one more disciple, right? Like, maybe it saves one more person.
Yeah.
Maybe it brings one more person understanding or a way out of whatever they're going through. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy to think that God knows the exact like situations that we need to find our way out of things.
Yeah.
But that's what gets me through some of those thoughts is like damn, I had to go through all this shit. Like, why is it? Like, why did I have to go through all this? Why did this happen?
Because like we've talked about, it's the only way that we would learn.
Yeah, right? Like, we had to get punched in the face.
We had to get punched in the face because we weren't listening to him whispering to us.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not as close to God as I should be. And I don't know many people that are because it's a process. But I try every day. You know, I read, I listen to certain things, I repeat things in my head, I pray a lot. And that's about, you know, sometimes the best you can do in a day. And if you're doing those things, then you should be proud of yourself. You should know that you're on a better path and that you're improving every day. You're not where you should be, but you're not where you were. And that's a lot more than most people can say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm proud of what we're doing here, and I hope that at the very least, if we, like I said, like if we have one person, I can feel like we did something good. And I know that you were not excited to tell this story, and I know that somebody will get something out of it, so I'm glad that you did it. And I just hope that it gives people a better insight on what we have to share here.
Yeah, and like I said, we're not fake. We're not, you know, saying all this to try to make us rich and famous. That's not why we started this. If it turns out to be something big someday, great. If it doesn't, and it's just us sitting here, hopefully, you know, after we update our equipment and get a new place to record in, you know, hey, that's fine. But we just want to help people because we know what it's like to be where you are, where you were, what you're going through. May not be the exact same scenario, but sometimes pain is pain, and everybody can relate to pain. Everybody can relate to sorrow, to sadness, to being let down, to hurt. And sometimes, you know, that pain kind of like bonds us together so that we can lift each other up. And I think that's one of the reasons God allows us to go through certain things. But lastly, don't give up on yourself, no matter what anybody says. Learn to think better of yourself. Try every day. Love your family. Love your kids. Nothing's impossible with God. And if there's something in your heart that only you can see and understand, be relentless in making it happen. So until next time,
Be a savage.
be a servant.
Thank you, everybody, for watching.
If you like this at all, if you got any info, or you just like us going back and forth, making each other look stupid, just share with one person.
We are on podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And until next time,
Be a savage.
be a servant.